Hi, and welcome back to Lifestyle Management, and we're looking at Chapter 16, and we're into Part 2. And in Part 2, we're going to look at the impact on you and I, our health, and the environmental issues that may have impact on our life. So let's get started with Part 2 right away. The environment and our health. The Canadian Public Health Association has published an important documents that remind us that ecological determinants of health, now those are oxygen, water, and food, are inextricably linked to our overall well-being. Well, no kidding. Oxygen, water, and food. There's nothing more basic that we need than that. As you already know, these ecological determinants of health, oxygen, water, and food, are critical to our health and to our environment. Implications of these two things are linked. Health determinants and environmental conditions. Okay? So the current state of our ecosystem is in peril by many scientists' perspectives, and maybe even from your own. They suggest it's our human action that is affecting all three of these important variables: biological determinants, ecological conditions, and therefore our oxygen, water, and food. So we're going to begin with the environment and physical health. Simply put, no individual is immune to the effects of changes in the environment. Almost 23%, or about a quarter, of all deaths and diseases globally can be linked to environmental factors, such as the exposure to harmful elements in the air, in the water, in the soil, and in our food. They have been found to be a cause of respiratory and cardiovascular disease, as well as certain cancers. That can translate into huge numbers of people being affected and linked to things that are preventable. And that's pretty sobering. Next, now let's touch on environment and our psychosocial health. Research shows that there's a strong relationship in location or place. It's essential to our own human health. So shifting climates can complicate and destabilize that sense of attachment to where we live. Now, what I mean by that is our connection to where we live is very important to our own personal health. The fact is that you have chosen to come to either Owen Sound to go to college, Barrie, or Orillia, generally the southern Ontario area, and there might be some importance because maybe your friends and family might be there, or things like the things you like to do, skiing, hiking, canoeing, and boating, are in this area. And that's what makes our sense of place important to us. The focus is on our psychosocial health will be important as we attempt to adapt to environmental challenges, temperature, drought, flooding. Not everybody gets to remain where they are because some of these environmental changes create detachment or destabilization of one's location or place. People being moved because of floods or droughts is happening here in Canada, and certainly it's happening in other parts of the world. All right, so let's now consider some of the other effects on our health, and one that we're very familiar with is pollution. And by definition, pollution is any change in the air, water, or soil that can reduce its ability to support life. That includes us. We are the life supported by air, water, and soil. The effects of pollution depends on the concentration of the pollutant, how long it remains in the environment, and its chemical nature. For example, in Owen Sound, there's a chunk of land by the water, which would be great, for a business or buildings to have a good view of the water and fill in that area, but yet a developer can't build there right away. They have in the soil contaminated soil based on previous industry years and years ago, metal smelting, I think it was, and so it's left contaminants in the soil. So it will all need to be dug up and replaced with clean, neutral soil before any development can occur. Environmental agents that trigger changes in the genetic material of living cells are called mutagens. So these are the kinds of conditions in the environment that can affect genetic material. Now, mutagens that cross the placenta of a pregnant woman can cause spontaneous abortions and birth defects in fetuses. They're called teratogons. Now, a variety of health problems that have been linked with pollution. Toxic substances can enter the body through our lungs, through our digestive system, or through skin contact. A combined interaction of two or more hazards can produce the effects greater than either one alone. So we have to be very conscious of the world around us because it can impact us in ways we really don't think that it can. Another, for example, air pollution. Air pollution is of any sort can cause numerous ill effects, including chronic bronchitis, emphysema, heart disease, cancer, and a weakening immune system. Now, this can be caused by anything from something as benign as sanding your floors of your house or doing drywall in your living room to the fine particles generated while you're in a city and near a heavily used road system like the 401 and the 400. You have the emissions from the cars, certainly. This includes not only that which you can see, but the smog. That's what you can see near in the Toronto area, but also what you cannot see, the nanoparticles. When you think about tires and trucks, tires on cars and trucks and the rubber on the road, just because you can't see the wear of the tires happening doesn't mean there aren't tiny nanoparticles from the tires flying through the air. It's the things that you can't see that over time can affect our immune system, our respiratory, and other body functions. It makes sense that when we consider clearing the air, that makes sense. Air pollution can be as dangerous as smoking. Pollutants can destroy the tiny hair-like structures, they're called cilia, in our lungs. And the cilia's job is to remove irritants from our lungs. And this can result in bronchitis, excessive mucus and coughing, limiting our breathing efficiency. Air pollution can affect many aspects of our quality of life. Being outdoors, particularly near cities and major roadways, during high pollution days. Think high smog, wildfire, smoke. Healthy or not, we can't be at risk. Like I said, I run in the morning from about 5:30 to 7:30 in the morning. I had to miss some morning runs this summer because of wildfire smoke in the air. And as I mentioned, smog. Let's consider smog then. So if you've ever been in Toronto or any other large city in North America, or for that matter in the world, you're likely familiar with the term smog. Smog is a combination of smoke and fog. Smog is made up of chemical vapors, auto exhaust, industrial and commercial pollutants, and particulates and ozone. That reacts to the sunlight. It's important to note, as I've mentioned, that these chemical vapors are minute particles floating in the air attached to raindrops even. These are not things that we see, and we also don't know what's in them. Sulfur dioxide smog, it's also known as gray air smog, is produced by burning oil of high sulfur content. Alternatively, brown smog, or photochemical smog, is also found in large traffic centers results principally in nitrous oxide of car exhaust reacting with oxygen in the air, forming nitrogen dioxide, which produces a brownish haze when exposed to sunlight and other pollutants. Ozone is one of the most widespread pollutants, and it can impair a body's immune system and long-term lung damage. Well, not all pollutants are outdoors. There are indoor pollutants as well. And since people in industrialized nations spend more than 90% of their time inside buildings, the quality of the air they breathe can have a greater impact on their well-being than even the outdoor pollutants. What is most hazardous form of indoor pollution? Well, it includes carpets, paints, and cigarette smoke. Now you can check your text for the list of common indoor pollutants and their associated health risks. That will be table 16.3. Now another indoor pollutant viewed as an environmental risk is mold. If you're a person who's particularly sensitive to mold, you know the impact that it can have. Certainly mold can get into your system through the air without you really being aware of it. Mold needs to be eradicated completely. Otherwise, it will grow again. Now let's move from air pollution to another equally important element. It's the quality of our drinking water. Any water sold in sealed containers is considered to be bottled water. Although bottled water is usually disinfected to remove harmful organisms, many studies have shown that bacteria are found in most bottled waters now. Now you might be aware that this recent discovery of what are known as microplastics, they have also been found in bottled water. Now check in your text for the example offered regarding the Six Nations and Nestle's and the Canadian government. I put a graphic up to show you that the study that was done about what was found in bottled water, they found more microplastics in bottled water than we find in our own tap water. And that in itself is kind of concerning, because where does the bottled water come from, and where does our lake water, how is it affected? It would seem our lake water and oceans would be much more affected, yet plastic bottles are. Okay. Another big concern has been plastic bottles are environmentally unfriendly. 9 out of 10 plastic bottles end up in the garbage rather than in recycling. They will take more than 1,000 years to biodegrade. Add to this, as I had mentioned earlier about gyres. These are just these huge islands of plastic that get blown in from the wind. These gyres are not just bottles, they're all sorts of plastics, plastic bags, plastic, twist ties, plastic everything. When they are not put in recycling, plastics that is, they get left out where the wind can take them, and they find their way into our oceans, lakes, and rivers. Now, something that's used in water, and it can be helpful, is fluoride. In Canada, most of us are exposed to fluorides on a daily basis through trace amounts found in our food and the fluoride that's been added to our drinking water supply to prevent tooth decay. The risks of using fluoride appear to be very small. Health Canada has set a labeling requirements for dental products such as toothpastes that contain fluoride, as they know many young children tend to swallow toothpaste. You can't have a poisonous product like a chemical that way. There are limits to how much you can put into these products to limit the effect that it has on our health. Now, another product that's put into water is chlorine. Chlorine is a disinfectant, and it's added to our drinking water to reduce or eliminate microorganisms such as bacteria and viruses. Now, many Canadians are becoming concerned about chlorinated water supplies, and a number of cities are now using ozone to disinfect water. So when we become more aware, and as a collective, we can have an impact on what happens in our cities and our homes. Chemical risks are also something we should be aware of. Now, some chemicals may be more of a risk than others. Some of these you'll be familiar with. Most notable among the chemicals would be pesticides. Pesticides are toxic, and we should look to safer alternatives wherever possible. If there are no safer alternatives, purchase only domestic class products bearing a PCP registration number. We have regulations as to what we can sell. However, it's important to remember that even though it can be sold, say at a Canadian Tire, for example, that you must still use protective clothing when using pesticides. That includes gloves, perhaps a mask, especially if you're working outdoors with them. If it's a windy day, those aerosols will get back into your lungs. When you're done, wash your face and hands with soapy water and clean your clothing separately from other clothes. This should give you an idea of how damaging some of these risks are that are caused by pesticides. So, what are some of the risks to pesticides? Well, there's a number of them, and I'll just review a few things. There are endocrine disruptors. These are chemicals that act on or interfere with the human hormones, particularly estrogen, which may pose threat to fertility, falling sperm counts, and cancers to reproductive organs. Chlorinated hydrocarbons include several high-risk substances that may cause cancer, birth defects, damage to the wildlife, and environment. Now, the one that comes to mind to me is DDT, and it's probably one of the most familiar. It doesn't get used anymore, I don't believe. Now, there are alternatives. There are organic phosphates, and these include chemicals such as malathion. Now, they break down much more rapidly than chlorinated hydrocarbons, and most of them are highly toxic. Usually, they indicate that on the label, so make sure you read everything carefully. Now, because of the day and the age that we live in, chemical weapons, in particular terrorist threats and weapons of war, have included the use of chemical weapons. Chemical weapons have been used to contaminate soil, air quality, water quality all over the world. Bioterror agents include poison gases, herbicides, and other types of chemical substance that can kill, maim, or temporarily incapacitate somebody. Chemical weapons can kill rapidly, or they can kill slowly. The possible protections include gas masks, shelters, or sealed suits in vehicles. Now, some of the more common chemicals used are racin, sarin, and another one known as VX, which is a venomous agent X. Not something we want to have any experience with, of course. Now, something that's more common to our experience is bioterror has been more experienced than bioterror has been chemicals in the cosmetic industry. There are some 10,500 industrial chemicals that are used as cosmetic ingredients. Now, some of these ingredients are known as carcinogens, pesticides, endocrine disruptors, and plasticizers. A report, What's Inside Me, that counts, a survey of toxic ingredients in our cosmetics, indicates that almost 80% of all cosmetics and personal care products in Canada contain at least one of the 12 chemicals known as the Dirty Dozen. I put that up beside me there. There are loopholes in the national cosmetic regulations that allow for an incomplete ingredient list on many personal care items. And what you're seeing beside me here is a group of what is known as the Dirty Dozen. Now, these are in your text as well. The usage of microplastics needs also to be reduced. They can persist in our environment for centuries. They unfortunately become indistinguishable to our oceans and marine life. They look like food. And that's becoming a very, very big issue. Finding animals either wrapped up in plastics or having fed on plastics and died. Now, more close to home, household cleaning chemicals are also ones that have invisible hazards. And these aren't things that we normally think about either, but can affect our health through our skin, ingestion, or breathing in toxic fumes. I'll list some of the more harmful ones here. You can find more details in your textbook. 2, butanoxidetol. It's found in laundry stain removers, glass cleaners, oven cleaners, and rust removers. A more common one you'd be familiar with is ammonia, and it's found in many household cleaners. Coal tar dyes are found in cosmetics and some cleaning supplies. And then we have a combination of monoethylamine, MEA, diethylamine, DEA, and triethylene T. And they're found in cleaners, detergents, and degreasers. Sorry about the pronunciations there. They're not common terms for me. Now we're going to consider some of the invisible hazards. And I know some of what we have reviewed already were considered invisible. However, these do not fit in another category. These are various forms of radiation. And we'll start with electromagnetic fields and radiation. Now, you probably don't think about that a lot, and however, the electromagnetic fields, or the EMFs, consist of any electrically charged conductor that generates two kinds of invisible fields, the electric and the magnetic. These could include microwaves, computers, TVs, radios, so clearly we are among them. Laboratory research on animals has shown that alternating current, which changes the strength and direction 60 times in a second, emits an EMF. And that may interfere with normal functioning of human cell membranes. The result may be mood disorders, change in the circadian rhythm. Now, these are the rhythms, the circadian rhythm that sort of exists in our brain that helps us to know when to prepare our bodies for awaking for daytime and when to prepare for bedtime. These EMFs are also linked to miscarriages, developmental problems, and even some cancers. Now, a new concern, and not really new, but it's one that I'm sure you're familiar with, cell phone use. and their possible health risks. Cell phones have only been publicly available in Canada since 1985, just around 40 years. There are scientists that have found an elevated risks of tumors in cell phone users compared to people who rarely or never use cell phones. Now, the risk was highest among those who had used cell phones for 10 years or more. And so that puts a good chunk of the population at some degree of risk, yet unknown. Other environmental issues that can affect our health is irradiation of food. Now, we do this the use of irradiation of food is either radioactive substances or devices that produce an X-ray, and it's known as irradiation. And its primary benefit is to prolong our food and its useful life. And that's why some of our food, for example, our canned goods, they can last as long on the shelf as they do. Irradiated foods are believed to be safe to eat, and in Canada, several federal agencies are involved in regulating aspects of food irradiation processes. Given the amount and varied chemicals in our world, it should not be a surprise that some people are overwhelmed with what they know as multiple chemical sensitivity. MCS is a result of the proliferation of chemicals in our modern everyday life. Multiple chemical sensitivity, there's no agreed upon definition for this condition. There is no medical test that can diagnose it, and there's no proven treatment. Symptoms can include chest pain, depression, difficulty remembering, dizziness, fatigue, headaches, inability to concentrate, nausea, headache and pains in the muscle and joints. Now, the next form of pollution is one you might be familiar with and know someone who is noise pollution. Impaired hearing has increased, especially among young people. Hearing loss can have an impact on speech and language literacy as well as social development. Loudness or intensity of sound is measured in decibels. Sounds under 70 decibels don't seem harmful. Most hearing loss occurs on our job. Noise-induced hearing loss is 100% preventable, and it is also, unfortunately, irreversible. High volumes of sound have been linked to high blood pressure and other stress-related problems that can lead to heart disease, insomnia, anxiety, headaches, colitis, and ulcers. Most of us have been to concerts and sat by the speakers and headbanged ourselves to death for, 2 or 3 hours. But it's that kind of sound over the long haul that is the most damaging. Now you'll see figure 16.4, a graphic on noise levels and their decibel levels. If you're familiar with anatomy of your ear and your ear canal, the canals lead to what we call our cochlea. And the cochlea is like a snail-shaped structure in our ear, and it has little tiny hairs in there, in our ear, and it's that which the sound waves move these tiny hairs, and that's what our brain interprets as sounds. When the sound is very loud, those hairs get damaged, and once they're damaged, they're gone, and we start to lose capacity to hear sounds, and that's where noise pollution becomes a big issue. All right, that's the end of part 2, environmental health. I hope it's been interesting and valuable chapter for you, and I hope you just manage your pollution. Oh, great. We only have 2 weeks left, everybody. Thank you, and keep up the good work. Bye for now.